In this episode, I'm talking to Charlie Cook, founder and CEO of Rightcharge. Rightcharge are looking to simplify the decision-making and the purchasing process when looking at an electric vehicle. Rightcharge brings multiple brands of charge points to the consumer with rich descriptions, user reviews, and simple tools to find the right charge point for their requirements. To complete the journey, drivers are connected with the best local installers to get the charge point they need. Charlie is a young, ambitious, and impressive CEO. Hopefully this conversation will help you demystify your decision when considering an electric vehicle. Good afternoon, Charlie. Welcome to Zeus Founder and Chief Podcast. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you, Paul. Pleasure.
We've spoken before about your background and your journey to setting up Rightcharge. For our listeners, can you start talking about a young Charlie and where all this entrepreneur and CEO craziness came from?
Certainly. So my background personally, I've come from a family business background, which certainly I think has meant I've grown up wanting to start a company since I can remember. I think at every stage of my life, in fact, I've sort of decided ultimately to go on to the next thing rather than starting something in that moment, which I think always felt a little bit like failure. It was always like, oh, I'll come out of school and start a company, or I've ended up at university, oh, I'll graduate and I'll start something, oh, I've ended up in a job, etc., until I think the key change was I was lucky enough to get a job with Octopus Energy right in their early days, and I to be honest, I chose that role because it gave me the chance to really learn about new business, scaling fast, how to bring products to market.
What year would this be?
So this was 2017, and Octopus would have launched about a year earlier. So yeah, still quite a young business. And I did actually have an offer to go to a big business at that stage. So for me, it was, do I go and join a big company in renewables, or do I go to a startup?
And exciting.
Yeah, and it was about, do I want to go and learn how to run a big business, or do I want to go and learn how to start things? And at the end of the day, that was much more aligned with what I've always wanted. So I ended up at Octopus, and that was a fantastic decision.
Do you have entrepreneurs in this sort of family history, or were you a family of academics? What's your background?
Yeah, certainly more like on the entrepreneurial side, starting really with my granddad, actually. So my granddad started a local travel agency in the 70s, I think, which in those days could earn you a lot of money, which obviously can't these days.
Where was he sending people to and from?
He started it, in fact, as a specialist school ski trip business.
Okay.
So despite the fact, born and raised relatively poor in Swansea, I've done my ancestry.com, and I'm from Swansea for about 10 generations. I was born and raised in the Midlands, but it was my granddad's business that brought him out of that background and into England, and a bit more comfortable situation. He started with the school ski trips, and then that just evolved into a wider travel agency with your traditional family holidays, business holidays, that kind of thing. And my parents then ran that company and have done for most of my life. And I think, I have this sort of vivid memory of finding out that my dad was the boss of this little company when I was like, probably less than 10, and that, really kind of imprinted on me. I think that I wanted to go and do the same thing in the future.
It's not just sort of dinner table, kitchen table kind of conversations about running businesses.
Yeah, and it's, my mum's involved now. She does, our bookkeeping, and Dad came up with the name for the business, and all 4 of my siblings have been involved in some capacity at some point. So yeah, family business is in our blood, I think.
Cool, I like that, thank you. So the world of electric vehicles, whether OEMs, charging, the cost to charge these vehicles, it feels like it's quite a confusing space for any consumer really, and it is, I think, albeit new technology. You decided to simplify it, and I said in my introduction how you go about that. I think it's probably best for you to explain it in your own words. Explain what Rightcharge does, and maybe come at it from a customer journey perspective.
For sure, and it is a totally confusing space, and so that really is the foundation of what we're trying to achieve, is to simplify this experience. Actually, at Octopus, so going back to that Octopus experience briefly, but whilst I was there, we launched a company called Octopus Electric Vehicles, and that was a EV only leasing company.
Right.
And so we had to learn about how to sell electric cars, but also then how to introduce people to setting up to charge at home, which charge point should you go for, who do you get it installed by. Obviously, there's a public charging aspect of that as well. And I think that really, it was in the early days of the market, but the problems that existed then still do quite, by and large, still exist today. So. And for me, the biggest thing was really at the time, anywhere you bought a vehicle from, they would generally have a charge point offering, but it would almost always be a single offer, a single charge point. And there was a perception that effectively all chargers are born equal, but there's certainly
explain that a little bit there.
Benefits in choosing the right one. So from your most basic level of getting a charge point installed and being able to schedule through to off-peak hours if you get an electricity tariff with off-peak rates overnight, which is what we recommend. But then some more advanced things like if you've got solar panels on your roof, or if you're thinking about getting solar panels, and actually a really large percentage of EV drivers, you probably wouldn't be surprised, are in that category. Then there's there's different charge points that might cost a little bit more up front, but they're able to actually read how much solar is being generated from your solar panels, and they'll notice if that generation starts to exceed what you're using in the house. So you've got a surplus of solar power at that point, and the charger's clever enough to go, okay, I'll start turning up the charge to the car at this moment so we can soak up that excess solar rather than pushing it back to the grid. I think that's a really nice example of just one feature that you'd like everyone to be aware of, at least, when they get their car. Because what we really don't want to see is people getting one charge point offer, they put it on the house, and then they learn a bit more about EV charging from their friends or from Facebook groups, and then a year later they realise they really made the wrong decision. Because that's quite a hard thing to come back from. You have to, pay another £500,000 to get that charge point replaced. So for us, it's about, let's make sure we get drivers the right charge point to begin with. And we do that through a really simple flow on the website. So you come onto Rightcharge, you answer 3 questions about your own preferences, and then you get a recommendation, or you see charge points listed in terms of suitability, actually, and you can select whichever one you like. So that's problem 1. And then problem 2 is the actual experience of then going through the process to purchase that charge point and get it installed can also sometimes be quite painful. And we did a bit of research earlier this year, actually. We surveyed 1,000 EV drivers, and 59% of them said that they found the process of setting up to charge at home overwhelming. Right. And I think that's, they struggle with the first piece, which is understanding which charge point to go for. And then even once they've got that far, I think there's an unfortunate prevalence of challenges, delays, lack of response, installer not turning up on the day, this kind of stuff. If you get anything done in your house, you're probably familiar with these types of problems. And so we want to just take that out of the whole process, because it feels to me like a bit of a thorn in the side of the electric revolution, and we want to make sure that pain point just doesn't exist. And the way we're doing that is by creating a network of the best charge point installation companies across the country, which brings us on to a little bit about our business model, because actually we're not charge point installers, we are a tech platform that enables charge point installations. So we're backed now by just over 100 of the best charge point installation companies in the UK. They sign up to our platform, customers see their prices, and we connect those customers to those charge point installers to get a great experience.
So how are you benchmarking the installers?
We use a combination of upfront due diligence. Once you're in this industry, you just start to learn and hear about which installation companies are really doing a very good job of customer experience. But as well as that upfront due diligence, we then carefully monitor their performance once they're on the platform. And that's the beauty of I guess the technology we've built, is that we can see stage by stage how every single customer is progressing through that process. And we can use that information to make sure that the best performing installers, so those who are getting back to customers as in the quickest possible times, getting the charge points installed as quickly as possible, they get more business, and vice versa, which is how we can install in an average of 2 to 3 weeks instead of sometimes 2 to 3 months that we see from typical market experiences.
So in a utopian world, when would a user, or more accurately, when would somebody looking to purchase an electric vehicle, when would they find you? When would they land on your platform? Have they already made the decision, or do they look at you at the same sort of time, so it all becomes one process? You're purchasing the car and the charge point's already there.
So we see, in terms of when the driver comes to us, I think we see a bit of a mixture, because a mixture in terms of like some people will come to us way before they've bought their car. Okay. Some people will come way after. I think
that'd be me.
Yeah, and
post-purchase, I've got a car. What do I do?
Yeah, that's definitely a pretty clear category. You get people that are like, oh, my car's coming in 5 days. I need to get a charge point installed, which is fine, and obviously we'll make sure we do the best possible job for those. But yeah, we'll either see them come to us before they've made that vehicle purchase, or it will be usually soon after. And typically the way they find out about us is one or two ways. So either they'll be referred to Rightcharge by the company they've bought their car from, so if it's a dealership group, or nice. A leasing company. So we partner with the big dealership groups, leasing companies, and effectively become their recommended charging partner.
Okay, well done.
So that's one way that a driver would find us, or perhaps they just go online and will be visible on Google once they search, what do I do about charging?
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
Okay, no, thank you. So you may have already touched on this, but how long did it take to move from the experiences that you were seeing in your previous employment to essentially where we are at the moment? So you had the light bulb, right, okay, I think I've got a solution to this problem, or where I'm at isn't quite finding that solution, to where we are today?
It was a lot of exploration, to be honest. Definitely wasn't overnight. And I think one of the best decisions I made / one of the best offers I had, I suppose, two sides of the same coin, is Octopus gave me the chance to continue working in my role 2 days a week. Okay. Initially, that was, I think the agreement with my boss was that would last 3 or 4 months whilst I set up the company. Ended up lasting 12. So I really learnt from that. I mean,
was that them trying to keep you, or them thinking this idea won't get off the ground?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, let's just bring him back in 3 months once this has flopped.
Let it get him out of a system.
Yeah, exactly. But no, I mean, I guess maybe advice to people who are thinking about starting a business is, I suppose, probably particularly if it's the first time you've done it, particularly if it's like a new market and you've got to find your way a bit. I think trying to maintain some level of employment, like in parallel, maybe not 5 days a week, because I tried that and it's really hard to get any progress, even if you're doing
a day
evenings
job
and
and a night
weekends. Yeah, it's just, it's obviously it burns you out, but you just don't really get that much done. So I found the 2 day, for me, the 2 day system was brilliant. So yeah, to answer your question, sorry. So, it's been a 3-year journey up till now. And I launched the first version of the website, which was actually coded by my little brother. So bringing him into
That's
the picture.
Sibling number one.
Yeah, sibling number one. So he built the first version. We got that live in September 2019, and that was just the chargepoint service. And then a year later, we haven't really talked about this yet actually, but we do also help drivers with finding the best deal on their home energy.
Okay.
So long and short of it really is, as soon as you buy an electric car and you start charging at home, the equation for which tariff you should be on changes. And you can save a lot of money by switching. Generally, 90% plus of occasions, you can save money by switching to a specialist EV tariff. And typically what that means is it's just a tariff that an energy supplier has designed to have an off-peak rate of electricity, so a low rate of electricity overnight.
Because you should, in theory, be using, or it's more beneficial to use it off-peak, and you'll probably be using larger chunks of energy.
Precisely,
okay.
Yeah, because you can just choose to charge your car in that period. It doesn't really make much difference to your life. It's like how you charge your iPhone. So you definitely take advantage of those off-peak rates overnight. It increases the price of your day rate slightly, but the savings you make from your car outweigh any increase in the cost of your home energy, if you like.
Right, okay.
So you end up saving typically over £400 a year. The average driver can save just by switching to the best tariff, even today with the price cap. So that is a comparison service that we built from the ground up. We've got direct relationships with the energy suppliers. That's all done, in-house. And we launched that a year later. We raised the first funding round in 2020, which is how I went full time. So it was a sort of smallish, like angel, friends and family round.
Okay.
And then year after that, raised a slightly larger 700,000 pre-seed round. And then fast forward 1 year, and that's today.
So you've kind of touched on some challenges, and I'll elaborate on my question. So when you're bootstrapping a business, as it sounds like you obviously have done, and you've kept a job whilst trying to launch this, what are the sort of early day challenges that you face? How do you get it off the ground? How do you get the solution that you're offering into the mindset of whether it's the OEMs, the dealers, the energy people, getting yourself up Google, etc.? Just talk to us on those headaches.
Sure, yeah. How long do we have?
Well,
yeah. Everything is a challenge, and I think that's really part of the beauty of doing something like this. Starting your own business is, if you really like learning, if you like being outside of your comfort zone a bit, then that's never going to stop.
Does it help that you're passionate about this particular subject?
Yeah, 100%. I'm not sure I can imagine running a business that I'm not passionate about the subject matter. Maybe some people are successful with that, but I think the vast majority of successful entrepreneurs will be very passionate, I would expect. So yeah, everything's a challenge. You learning how to hire, learning how to build things without spending much money, learning how to sell is a huge one, actually. And in fact, I'm not entirely sure I realised this when I started, but
Go on.
Selling is my full-time job, pretty much. Vast
You're
majority
B2B to C essentially.
B2B to C, but if you think about it, I mean, perhaps 3 of my most important things that I do are partnerships and leading on some of the bigger partnerships these days, fundraising, and recruiting. And in all 3 of those, all you're doing is selling the business in a slightly different flavour maybe, but you're selling the vision. You're selling what you've achieved already, and you're selling the value proposition to the customer. So, yeah, you just become a full-time salesperson.
When did you realise that you were on the right path? When did you realise that, this is not just an idea and something that I know makes sense, but actually this is making a difference to people, and we're starting to see some volumes coming through? When was that moment?
Yeah, great question. I think probably 2 moments, and maybe what's quite interesting about our business is because we're a platform, we just have an insane number of stakeholders, because that's basically what we do, is we connect people. So I guess the first moment where it felt like perhaps it was going to work is talking to the installation companies and realizing that they were interested in signing up to something like this, and they were obviously importantly quite comfortable with paying for the service for the business that we generate for them. Second threshold or milestone, I suppose, then was the first few customers that came through. So we realized that what we'd built was useful to drivers, to homeowners, and actually they're choosing to go with us over the multitude of other offers in the market. And then the third one, which took longer, and there was definitely a moment where I thought this wasn't going to happen. But the third one was finding out that not just vehicle retailers, car retailers valued the service, but actually that some of the UK's biggest car retailers value the service. Was like that moment where it was like, okay, we have this service with 2 sides of the marketplace, with installers and customers, and both of them are quite happy with it. But that's just going to remain a hobby unless we've got some way to scale it. And so that's why that third one was important. And I'd say probably, if I try to pinpoint that moment, it was probably in last year when we signed a deal with Lookers, top 3 dealership group. And that was the moment where, we were like, okay, this is something that actually is valuable to...
Rightcharge here. It's starting to make a dent.
There we go. Yeah. So, but no, like I said, I think maybe 6 months before that, I remember feeling like perhaps that was never going to come, and wondering whether this was what this business model would work. So there's moments where you're not sure as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Thank you. Let's touch a little bit on the detail then of the business, and we'll focus on your business model and talk a little bit around fundraisers that you've done. What is the revenue model for Rightcharge?
Effectively, we charge a commission from our installation partners. So for each install they do, we earn a commission, small commission. And in addition, we, under normal market conditions, we earn a commission from a tariff switch as well. Okay. So we've got contracts with the installation companies and we've got contracts with energy suppliers, and we are still making a vastly reduced, but we are still making a bit of commission on the tariff side. So as a business today, we are keeping that we're keeping the tariff comparison service live, updated, usable, because we have thousands of people using it every month, but we make basically nothing from that. But it's a great value add for our drivers who come to the service initially for charge points.
So do you expect then, with the current pressures on energy prices, will that continue, or when that normalises, what will happen then in terms of the revenue model?
We'll certainly see a return for that revenue stream once the energy market returns to some level of normality.
And is normality stability or just lower prices?
I think it's really about the position the energy suppliers are in, because where they are today, they can't afford to acquire. It doesn't make sense right now for them to acquire additional customers. Previously in this crisis, they've been paying for every customer they have, so customer acquisition has been quite obviously turned off. But as the natural gas prices come down, which they are, the tariff prices will also decrease. There'll be margin in that business again for energy suppliers, and at that moment, obviously, they'll want to return to growing and to growing their customer base, and that's obviously where we can help them to get those EV drivers switched over to their tariffs.
So then, to touch on fundraisers, you've mentioned that you bootstrapped it. You would have probably got friends and family involved at a very, very early stage, but you've mentioned that you've got angels, and you are, as we sit in December 2022, crowdfunding on
Correct.
the Seeders platform.
Correct.
Can you talk us through just those stages of fundraisers that you've done to help the listeners understand what you've brought into the business so far? And then, interestingly, why did you go down the crowdfund route?
Sure thing, yeah. So as you say, originally the business was bootstrapped. I mean, as an example, it seems kind of crazy to me these days, but the original version of the website was actually built for £1,000. Feels like we can't do anything for £1,000 now. No. But I managed to sort of get that over the line by I worked with a friend of mine who does design. So we got
your siblings to do it.
Well, he eventually built the first. Actually, sorry, yeah, you're right. The first version cost me £1,000 with my brother, and then the second version cost me £1,000 because I put a poster up in Imperial University for like part-time coder, and this absolute genius applied. And obviously, it's a part-time gig for him, so he didn't mind doing it as a bit of work to go on his CV. He went on actually to go and work for Palantir, which is, I don't know if listeners will have heard of that, but probably one of the most impressive tech companies in the world. Very underground, actually.
You found him?
Sorry?
You found him?
Yeah, I did. I sourced him, and then he left for a big tech company. But maybe just to give you a flavour, I mean, that was kind of how I managed to get the business off the ground in the early days, with basically just using the savings I had in the bank account. And then in 2020, which was about a year after I started, I was able to raise £100,000 round from friends and family and a few angels. A year later, last year I raised a pre-seed round, which was £700,000. That was quite an experience. All of these funding rounds are quite an experience. We brought on some brilliant angels at the beginning. So one of the guys, actually, a guy called Henry Dezot, he was the founder of a company called Look After My Bills, which was a auto switching service. So you just sign up, give them permission to switch you. Happy days, beautiful idea, sold to Go Compare. And actually, when he was launching it, he was on Dragon's Den and got the best ever deal on Dragon's Den. So Henry came on board, a bunch of other, some other ex-founders. We had two big investors come in, and one of them came in, and we were just about to sign the agreement for, I think it was 150,000 or something like that. And actually my lawyer was quite slow at the time, so not bitter, but it took him a little bit of time to get the contract drafted. And during that period, the energy crisis really started. Mm-hmm. And for them, they were really interested in the tariff comparison side and that revenue stream, because that's what they knew. So we lost them. So anyway, we built it back up, and then the ending was an interesting moment, because we were closing at 5 p.m. on a Wednesday in November, and I got a LinkedIn invite from a Norwegian chairman of a VC fund in Norway, and he sent me a message and said, are you fundraising? I said, well, we are, but we're actually closing at 5 o'clock today. So why don't we catch up in a week or two? Because, obviously there could be opportunities at the next round. And he replied and said, well, if you're closing today, why don't we talk today? And we jumped on the phone at 4 o'clock, and by 4:30 he'd put in 100k. So that took our round from 600k to 700. That brought on our first VC, first institutional money as well. The CEO of that VC, so it's Link Capital, CEO of that fund, is now on our board. So she came onto our board when we created it a couple of months ago. So yeah, it's been a fantastic journey, and as you say, we're now raising a round on Cedars, which
how much on Cedars you're looking
to? 300,000 target. Okay. And we'll see where it gets to. But for us, it's just a fantastic opportunity to bring on board the EV community and a lot of our community from the sector as well, that they can invest anything from, £10 to £10,000. That's the beauty of Cedars. And we expect we'll have 200 or 300 investors probably come via that route. And one thing for us with that is, if you drive an electric car, then I think you tend to find one of the favourite topics of conversations for people who drive electric cars are electric cars. So there's that sort of word of mouth opportunity for ambassadors that are also investors, which I think is a really nice win-win for us.
Cool, that's good. Yeah, we meet a lot of businesses that, when they have done crowdfunding, it is predominantly for that retail customer base, and to sort of raise the profile, and you're not a brand per se, but it's about that brand recognition and be able to get yourselves out into the consciousness of people.
Totally, yeah.
So we touched on challenges, and quite a lot of the conversations being on challenges, and I think it's probably relevant for you given where you are in the sort of maturity and growth of the business. We are meeting you as you are growing rather than you sort of reach maturity. Other than the challenge that you've had growing the business itself, what have been the challenges from a macro economic and environment perspective? And again, we've sort of touched on energy prices and tariffs and such, but how does that affect a business like you yourselves that are so plugged into that? Pardon the pun.
I suppose first and foremost, I personally feel very lucky that we are in a industry sector that is just obviously going to continue growing.
Yeah.
And I don't think many sectors have that level of comfort. In fact, it's government mandated that our sector grows up to 2030, which is pretty amazing. And we're seeing the EV sector grow anywhere from 30 to 50% year on year. That's been the last couple of years, I think I've been closer to 50. So it's mega growth. So, nothing to complain about really. However, I suppose, well, actually, perhaps if I just elaborate a little bit on that, because, we are in the automotive sector. And so we're very much in tune and close to our automotive partners who rely on new car sales, whether be they electric or petrol. So it's just an interesting dynamic where obviously we've seen a bit of a reduction in new car sales over the last 12, 24 months. However, I think what everyone realizes is that the EV growth comes because we are seeing a switch of technology within that new car market. So the fact that we've got this drop in new car sales doesn't massively impact the EV rate of growth. And I think, we're also seeing some EV brands are actually doing very well at managing the supply challenges that we have today. So overall, I think the market we're in is just a brilliant one, and we can never use that as an excuse, I suppose. However, clearly we're in challenging economic times at the moment. We've discussed the impact on the energy market, which is, severe. And I think the other factor that we have to consider is that also capital raising is a lot harder now than it was. And so what that means for us is that, well, we're fortunate that we've been well funded last year. We looks like we look on track to raise a successful round now as well. But I think I have to be very conscious that next year what we might have expected to be quote unquote enough to raise what we need to raise might not be enough. So for us it just means we've got to go faster and be more ambitious and grow our revenues faster than we might have thought we needed to. I mean, obviously we want to do it as fast as possible, but fundraising does lead our targets. So going into next year, we're using what we think we need to show to investors as a guide for what the whole business has to achieve.
For that growth.
Yeah.
So looking further afield then and into the future, what are the next stages of evolution for Rightcharge, whether that is product-led or geographies?
I think the future looks like an incredibly exciting space for us. We've got the expansion of our existing business model and scaling of that business, I suppose, purely from the chargepoint installation and tariff switching, whenever the revenue comes back, it's slightly relevant. The activity there will grow as in line with the chargepoint installations. So, we're lucky we're getting to talk to really exciting businesses in the automotive space, leading auto retailers, learning more about them every single day. So that part of the business is really exciting for me as well personally, and we'll be developing the platform and we'll just be making it more intelligent, more powerful, and ultimately the whole goal of that is to make the experience better and better and better for the customer and to be able to handle higher and higher volumes and scale. However, in parallel, we have this ambition to not just use our model to help people install charge points, but actually we see a lot of the challenges that we're solving on the charge point installation are shared by homeowners wanting to install other technologies, and specifically solar panels, battery storage, and we expect in a 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, more and more we'll see heat pumps, really growing. And if you look at those two markets, or two segments where you've got charge points and then other home renewable technologies, you've got complexity, you've got lack of obvious providers in the market, and those are the challenges. But additionally, you've got probably a similar customer base, potentially slightly more affluent, so can afford these technologies earlier on in the adoption curve, so eco-minded. And then if you look at sort of on an infrastructure level for us as a business, we already have this network of installation companies across the country that are trained and brilliant at not only installing charge points, but they do install solar and battery storage in particular. And finally, from a data perspective, we gather data through the general process of helping people with the charge point and their tariff that we can use to then make it seriously easy for them to understand what the ROI might be on a solar system or a battery storage system.
So domestic energy, being at the centre of that in terms of improving people's efficiencies and cost savings and making people run their houses or vehicles efficiently. That's the eventual.
Totally, yeah. Just helping electric car drivers go on a journey to decarbonise their homes and reduce their energy bills at the same time. And I would love to see Rightcharge develop into a business over the next few years where we become the go-to company for decarbonising your home, going green, and breaking down the barriers for people to do that.
Cool. When we finish the podcast, it's a tradition, this series, to finish with 2 questions. One of them is going to be slightly more challenging for you, given that I think I've been kind enough to say that you're quite a young CEO. So what would you have said to your younger self, which probably isn't that long ago, knowing what you know now in business, but you can maybe talk around day one when you probably thought, Christ, how are we going to get this going to where you are today? So your younger self, and then secondly, who would you call your icon? Who is your icon?
So, firstly, I think I'm feeling a lot less young. I've got my first kid coming in January, little girl, so I think I'm probably going to feel a lot less young after that as well.
Well, we will immediately after. Yeah.
But yeah, younger self, as you say. So, number one tip. I think something that I've sort of retrospectively been quite happy about, decisions I've made in my life have been to take risks.
Okay.
I think probably I'm personally quite a risk-loving person, so maybe I made those decisions a bit easier, but maybe to my younger self I would just exaggerate that, take more risks. If there's something you're excited about, then go for it. And the value of actually getting out there and doing something, even if it's like the tiny little bit of what you want to try and get done, is so high, because you can spend so much of your time just thinking about things and imagining things. But the value of just getting out there and just trying something small, because if there's value in it, it might just build momentum and become that larger thing that you might otherwise think is impossible to achieve. It's sort of like being action orientated with what you want to do.
Be brave.
And be brave. Yeah.
And your icon?
I actually probably take it right back to the beginning of the podcast, back to my granddad. So certainly I think he's been a huge influence in my life, and sadly he passed away a few months ago, which is unfortunate, but he had a fantastic life, and all really built around the fact that he did that, I guess. Really, he broke out from generations of coal miners in Swansea because he was willing to take a risk and do something that he wanted to do and get it done. So
nice.
Hats off to Kilby.
I like that, and it's a nice nod to your granddad to mention him. Well, Charlie Cook, you've got your name is one of my boys, one of their favourite books. God knows how you're going to explain that to your daughter when you're trying to read that to her. For parents of young children, I think you'll know what I'm talking about there. You've hopefully saved our listeners some money as well along the journey, or when they visit the Rightcharge website, they'll understand how that will work for them. Thank you very much for joining us on the Found and Cheap podcast.
Thank you for having me, Paul. Thank you.
This content is issued by Zeus Capital Limited, which is authorised and regulated in the United Kingdom by the Financial Conduct Authority for designated investment business, and is a member firm of the London Stock Exchange. Nothing in this podcast should be viewed as investment advice. Listeners should consult an investment professional before making any decisions regarding topics mentioned in this podcast. The views expressed in this podcast are those of the participants and not of Zeus. Please note that participants in this podcast may have financial interests in the matters discussed.